So, what does your personality say about your childhood developmental trauma? A lot. Let me explain. When we are born little narcissists, and that's a good thing because we can't do anything for ourselves. We rely on our parent figures, caretakers, to do everything for us, to change our diaper, to feed us, to put us to bed, to keep us safe, to keep us warm, to keep us dry. We can't do anything for ourselves. All we can do is cry and make some sounds perhaps and let the person know that we are unhappy, uncomfortable, whatever. Now, fortunately, most of us outgrow that narcissistic phase. Some of us don't, and I'm sure you all know one of those in your life. However, the ones of us that do outgrow that, and even the ones that don't, we then start to develop our personality from the moment we're born. Now, let me just say, we are born not completely clean slate, because there's stuff like generational trauma, legacy trauma, on a cellular level that is passed down from generation to generation, and even birth trauma or in utero trauma. So a child is absorbing the mother's stress levels when the fetus is in the womb, and sometimes the child can also have, and the mother, a very traumatic birth, which is what happened to me. And this really affected my personality going forward. I became very sensitive to light and sound and emotion. Still am. But now that I understand it, I'm able to self-regulate a lot better. So if you've had a birth trauma, or if you know that your mother had a very difficult pregnancy, perhaps it wasn't the best of her pregnancy wasn't the best of circumstances for her, then that is sort of fed into the child through the umbilical cord and whilst they're in the fetus. So it can start before we even come out of the womb. And this isn't to focus on the negative. This is actually to focus on the positive. But I want to give you an overall view of how this works. So the first 3 years of our lives are fairly nonverbal. Maybe by the time we're 2 to 3, we're saying short phrases, a couple words, but we don't really have a command of the language, and therefore we can't communicate. And everything, certainly for humans, is about communication, our ability to communicate. So you hear people sometimes say, oh, my child is going through the terrible twos. Well, what's really happening is not that the child is terrible in any way. The child is just frustrated and cannot get to be understood. They don't have the words. And more importantly, they don't have the emotions. They don't have the words attached to the emotions. They don't have the nuance of their emotions. They might be angry or happy, but they don't necessarily have a lot in between. And even if they do, even if they know they're sad, at this stage, they haven't even connected it. So as Dr. Bessel van der Kolk has said, and I do believe him, and I agree with this, is all childhood developmental trauma is nonverbal. It's laid down before we are able to speak. Because I'm sure you're aware of this, but our brain isn't fully formed until we're about 26 years old. And that is a long time to figure out how to process things, to build resiliency, to understand healing on our healing journey, or understand our personality adaptations, which I'm getting to. So the first 3 years of our lives, and before we're born, are very crucial. But the first 7 years of our lives are when we really develop our personality. So we develop it non-verbally, and that is a very interesting time because what we're doing is we're reacting to our environment. So we're developing our personality not genetically, but epigenetically, which means, loosely, epigenetics means it's the environment with which we've grown up in. So Dr. Gabor Mate has a wonderful word. It is a word. It's a long word. It's biopsychosocial. And what that means is humans are bio, we are the physicality, psycho, the mind, and social, which is the environment that we're in. And that's what is considered epigenetics. So we are not just the people that we were made from, we are also the environment that we've grown up in and how that affects us. So what happens is we are doing something called personality adaptations as we're growing up. So for example, and I will always use myself so that no one thinks this is about them, this is purely about me. I am a recovering people pleaser, as I call myself, and it's a lifelong journey because what I learned, some of my needs weren't met in my childhood from my parents. Now, there is no blame or shame to my parents because they came into my life, or I came into their life with their traumas. They had traumas, and that generation, they didn't understand any of this. They didn't even know that they could do something about it. They didn't even talk about it like we are talking about it today. So there is no blame to my parents. They did the best they could with the knowledge and the information that they had. However, what happened was they didn't understand the needs I had. And the three basic needs we have are to be seen and heard and acknowledged, validated, loved, whatever you want to put in there. Now, I had everything to keep me safe. I had food and clothing and good education and a home and all of those things. But my parents were quite emotionally shut down because of their traumas and how they were navigating the world with a lot of stress. And that is the real killer, stress. So my needs weren't met. So what I did was, unconsciously and unknowingly, I started to figure out that I could make other people happy. Sometimes or oftentimes I couldn't make my own parents happy, or I couldn't get the validation I needed or to be seen and to be heard in the way I needed, not my brother or anyone else, but me. So what I did is I realized that I could make other people like me by doing things for them. And sometimes those things were entertaining them. Sometimes those things were making them a meal when I got older, because this can be a lifelong thing. Sometimes it was I was on stage singing and dancing. There were audiences. So I would get the validation from groups of people or individuals, which caused me to feel a little bit better about myself. However, what I was doing is every time I was going outside of myself to make others happy first in order for myself to feel good, I was abandoning myself, which is what this is all about. So that is the archetype of people pleasing, right? Or fawning, and it's one of the trauma responses. There are other archetypes that I'd like to mention to you. Some people are overachievers. They work and work and work, and in our society we validate this, we celebrate this, we applaud this until they're absolutely burned out, and that's their way of getting acknowledgement, to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. Some people are underachievers. They hide their abilities because they feel that that's safer for them. Some people are what is called life of the party. I'm sure you all know those. They're always happy. They don't want to talk about anything serious. Now, I'm not in any way shaming any of these personality types because I have several of these archetypes myself. We all do. We're all carrying them around. But it's abandoning ourselves to connect to the outside world because at some point in our lives growing up, our needs weren't met. And these personality adaptations are developing our personality. So I'll tell you about a couple more before I conclude what this information tells us about our childhood. There's another archetype called the fixer. I'm one of those too. Bird with a broken wing, let me fix you. And it was, again, to go outside of self, to not have to deal with the pain that was going on inside of me or the abandonment or rejection that I felt. Because it's not that the parents don't love the child, it's that the parents aren't able to love the child in the way the child needs. So the child interprets that as abandonment and rejection. And that's how we continue to develop our personality and our personality adaptations. There are many, many archetypes, and I'm not going to go through all of them. There's the imposter syndrome, where you just are terrified that people are going to find out who you really are. again, that's a personality adaptation that is born out of being born into a household where there are two faces of the household. And again, I'll use myself because it's safer. My parents were very religious, but also there was a lot of rage and anger at home and depression. So we were one way at home. There could be rage, there could be smacking, there could be depression and shouting and all of that. But outside of the home, into the community and certainly into the church, there was none of that. All of that was tamed and curbed and shut down. No one swore, no one hit anybody, no one shouted at anybody. So what the child learns is that, there's two ways to be. Maybe this is my authentic self and this is the face and the self I put out into the world. So once again, we're abandoning ourselves to get our needs met and to not be rejected by our family, our parent figures, caregivers. So why does this matter? Because what happens is we then become a collection of these archetypes. So I said I would tell you why this is important in the information. Not that some of you may be therapists, but not that any of you are going to be therapists. But as a therapist, I can pick a lot of this up quickly in that I can meet a client and they can start talking or telling me about some of their things, and I begin to see their childhood trauma. So they obviously didn't have their needs met in a certain way that they became people pleasers or fixers or underachievers or overachievers. So there's a connection, there's a link back to every personality adaptation, to every coping strategy and survival strategy that we use to be seen and heard and loved, that connects back to what we didn't get in our childhood. Now, the beauty of this is none of this is fixed, okay? We learn this and we can unlearn this because we have something beautiful in the brain called neuroplasticity. It's the ability to change and morph and change our beliefs and our unconscious or subconscious behavior. So that is the good news. And that's what can happen when you work with a therapist or go on your own self-healing journey. This isn't everybody needs therapy. I'm not saying that at all, but I just want to raise your awareness to how our childhood unmet needs create our personality. So we're not born with a personality. We're not like, oh, I'm like that because my mother's like that. The only reason that really shows up, and this is good for you to know, is that again is epigenetic. We are modeling the behavior of the parent. So of course, if the parent acts like that and we want to be loved by them, we copy their behavior and we don't think about it. And as we grow up, maybe that type of behavior of people pleasing or overachieving or whatever begins to get in our way and begins to get in the way of our relationships. And that's when we begin to notice that how we're attaching to people, especially people that we love and a romantic relationship, our partners, that's when we begin to realize that there might be something that we need to deal with. So I hope that's helped. I hope it makes sense. I've covered a lot here, but basically this is it. We develop our personality in the first 7 years of our lives. The first 3 are crucial because we cannot speak really, and we cannot tell people how we feel because we don't have the ability yet to determine and define what those emotions are. We then develop these coping strategies, survival strategies, which can be people-pleasing, fawning, overachieving, underachieving, life of the party, fixer, caretaker. And we believe that they are who we are, but they're not. They're just adaptations of our personality to survive. So the really good news, and there's always good news at the end of these videos, is that this can all change. The first step is awareness, then there's acceptance of self, and then there's presence and more consciousness, and then there's choice. So follow my videos, I talk about this, and there's a lot more information. All that it remains for me to say is stay safe, and thank you for coming on this journey with me today.